Picture a road that is not a road. 1,966 miles of sagebrush, salt flat, granite pass and river ford, drawn in a line so thin that in most places it is nothing but the memory of hooves in the dirt. Now fill it with winter. Add alkali dust that eats the cracks in your lips, war parties with better horses than yours, and a schedule that says the mail crosses half a continent in 10 days, or somebody explains why. That's the Pony Express in 1860. The fastest thing on the continent, and the most fragile. A place where a 16-year-old boy could be the most important man between two oceans at midnight and be buried by strangers before noon. We're going back there tonight. Not as tourists looking at bronze statues of riders leaning into the wind. We're living it. One day, one boy, one relay station on the Carson River. Everything he would have seen, smelled, heard, and survived. So, I make these history stories, and honestly I still can't tell whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just weirdos who enjoy hearing about teenage orphans outrunning arrows for a company that was already bankrupt when it hired them. Either way, subscribe if you feel like it. Get comfortable. Here we go. The floor wakes you before the sound does. A tremble in the planks under the bench where you sleep in your boots. Faint, regular, coming up through the wood and into your spine like a second heartbeat that doesn't belong to you. For a moment, maybe half a second, you don't know what it is, or where you are, or why your whole body is already sitting up. Then your body answers for you, the way it has learned to. Horse, coming east to west along the river trail, still 2 miles out, maybe more. You feel hoofbeats through the ground out here long before you hear them, because there is nothing else in this country to feel. No wagons at this hour, no footsteps. No city humming somewhere beneath everything, just the cold and the river, and one horse running hard in the dark with the mail on its back. You are awake now the way a struck match is lit. The ache arrives next before any smell, before any sight. The particular ache of a body that already rode 85 miles 2 days ago and hasn't finished forgiving you for it. Your knees, the insides of your thighs, rubbed raw where the saddle took its tacks. The small of your back, your hands, stiff and cracked, folded in your armpits for warmth. The bench under you is a plank of cottonwood with a folded saddle blanket for a mattress, and the fire in the stone hearth has burned down to a dull orange breathing, and the cold has come in through every gap in the log walls to stand over you like a creditor. Only then, as you swing your boots to the floor, do the smells sort themselves out of the dark. Layers of them, tallow and neatsfoot oil from the tack hanging on the wall pegs, because leather gets fed out here better than some men do. Horse sweat and horse manure drifting from the corral through the chinks in the logs, a warm animal smell in all that cold. Wood smoke and last night's bacon grease gone stiff in the skillet. Sage, always sage, the whole great basin's one perfume, bitter and clean and endless, and underneath it all, you. Wool and sweat and dust and boy, unwashed since the river was warm enough to stand, which it is not, and will not be for weeks. Welcome to the Carson River country, in the far western corner of Utah Territory, in the 3rd week of April 1860. The line you ride for is 19 days old. You're lying. You were lying. You're up now, moving. On the night bench of Willow Bend Station, a home station of the Central Overland California and Pikes Peak Express Company, 1 log room and a lean-to kitchen and a tack shed and a pole corral, set on a low rise above a bend of the Carson River, where the willows grow thick enough to cut lodge poles. East of you there is desert for 80 miles. West of you there is Buckland's Ranch, and then Carson City, and then the wall of the Sierra Nevada with snow still on it, and then, 10 days away if every man and horse on the line does his job, the rest of the world. Your name is Silas Reed. You're 16 years old. Your father died in a placer pit above Gold Hill 3 winters ago when the gravel bank came down on him, and your mother died of fever in Sacramento the summer before that, and since then you have been nobody's boy, hiring out to ranches in the Carson Valley to tend other men's stock, until last month when a notice in a Carson City street changed the arithmetic of your entire life. You know it by heart. You will know it by heart when you're 80. Wanted. Young, skinny, wiry fellows not over 18. Must be expert riders, willing to risk death daily. Orphans preferred. Orphans preferred. You read that line 4 times standing in the mud, and you remember thinking, with something that wasn't quite pride and wasn't quite grief, well, that's me they're asking for. That's me exactly. The tremble in the floor has become a sound now, a real one, hoofbeats swinging up off the river flat, and there's no more time for remembering, because in about 4 minutes that horse arrives, and in about 6 minutes you leave, and the 2 minutes in the middle are the whole reason you exist. You're already dressed, because you sleep dressed on your nights to ride. Red flannel shirt, wool trousers, boots. You pull on the buckskin jacket cracked at the elbows that used to belong to a rider who quit in the first week. Quit after one look at the 26-mile desert, got on the stage to California, and left his jacket, which tells you what he thought of the jacket or the desert or both. You wrap the muffler twice around your neck. You take the slouch hat off the peg. Amos Clute is already at the door, which should be impossible, because 30 seconds ago you could hear him snoring behind the blanket curtain at the far end of the room, and yet here he is, boots on, lantern lit, sliding the bar off the door. 50 years old, built like a cask with a grey beard cut square and hands so scarred and knuckle-sprung they look like tree roots. He was a bullwhacker for the freighting side of this same company for 9 years before his knees gave out. Walking beside oxen from the Missouri River to Salt Lake and back, and there is nothing about this business, animals, weather, distance, or the men who own it, that he has not already seen. You're late, he says. You're not late. You're standing at the door, dressed, 40 seconds after the floor woke you. He says it every time. You have learned that it is not an accusation. It's a philosophy. On this line, everyone is late. Always. Against something. The schedule. The winter. The wire they keep saying will someday come. Being told you're late while standing ready at the door is Clute's way of telling you the world's one truth before he opens it. The door opens, and the cold takes your breath, and the stars are savage. No moon tonight, but out here the stars alone throw shadow, a great white smoke of them from one edge of the world to the other. And down the trail, close now, comes the horse. Charlie Beckett brings the stock around from the corral, leading a fresh horse saddled and cinched, a dark bay gelding stamping smoke out of its nose. Charlie is 17, out of Ohio, riding for the company since the very first week, which on a line 19 days old makes him an old-timer, a distinction he mentions roughly hourly. Right now he says nothing. Nobody talks in the last minute. The lantern hangs on its hook by the door, throwing a circle of yellow on beaten dirt, and the 3 of you stand in it like actors on the world's smallest stage, and the hoofbeats come up the rise, and the incoming rider shouts something wordless. Just noise. Just here I am, and then he's in the light. Horse first. leathered grey, salt-crusted, blowing like a bellows. Rider second, a lump of dust and buckskin called Harmon, who left Cold Springs when the sun was still up, and has been eating darkness ever since. He doesn't dismount so much as paw off the horse, and his legs buckle, and Clute catches him by the collar with one root-knuckled hand, and holds him upright, absent-minded, like holding a gate open. And now the 2 minutes. The mochila comes off the tired horse in one motion. You should understand what a mochila is, because for 18 months of American history, it is the most important object on the continent. A skirt of leather, shaped to drop over a saddle, with a hole for the horn and a slit for the cantle, and 4 locked pouches, one at each corner, riding fore and aft of your knees, so that a rider sits inside his cargo, wearing the mail the way a tortoise wears its shell. 3 of the pouches are locked in St. Joseph or Sacramento or Salt Lake, and no man between these places holds a key. The 4th is the way pocket, for the time card and dispatches taken up along the route. All of it together, leather and locks and letters, weighs about 20 pounds. Under the leather, wrapped in oiled silk against river fords and rain, ride the letters themselves, written on tissue paper, because every quarter ounce is money. $5 the half ounce this spring, which is a week's wage for a working man back in the States to send one folded whisper of paper across the continent at the speed of a running horse. Clute strips the mochila off the grey, while Charlie holds the fresh bay steady, and the leather crosses the lantern light between them like something alive, and Clute drops it over your saddle, horn through the hole, and slaps it once, flat-handed, the way you'd slap a hog to send it through a gate. 2 minutes, boy, he says, which is what he always says, and which is not a measurement but a benediction. You're up. The bay wheels under you, hot to go, and the last thing you see in the lantern circle is Harmon's white-ringed eyes over the rim of the tin cup Ada Clute has already pushed into his hands, and Charlie raising 2 fingers off the bay's bridle as he lets go, and Clute already turned away, leading the spent grey toward the corral. Done with you, because you are now the male, and the male is not a thing you stand around watching. The male goes through. That's the whole of the company's law, all its scripture in 4 words. Then the light is behind you, and the desert is in front of you, and the bay finds the trail in the dark better than you ever could, and the stars come down to the edges of the black land all around like the lid of a kettle, and you are 16 years old, alone, carrying the words of a nation on your knees, 85 miles from breakfast. They are paying you $100 a month for this. That number should stagger you, and it does. A grown man swinging a pick in the Comstock mines above you on the mountain makes $4 a day and is called rich for it. A labourer back in the States makes one. You make more than the schoolmaster, more than the deputy, more than any honest man you've ever personally known, and they pay it, or they have paid it, in clean gold coin, to boys. To skinny, wiry, expendable boys. Orphans preferred. It will be almost a year before you understand all at once on a winter evening with a newspaper in your hand why a company would pay so much for boys nobody would miss, and what kind of company does that, and what it means that the grandest, fastest, proudest thing you will ever be part of was born already dying. But that's a year away. Right now there is only the trail, and the cold, and the bay's long reaching stride swallowing the dark a rod at a time, and you lean down close to the whipping mane, and you ride. Riding at night in this country is a conversation between your body and the horse's body in which your eyes are not invited to participate. You cannot see the trail. The horse can, or says it can, and you have to believe it, because the alternative is believing nothing at 40 rods a minute. What you have instead of sight is a kind of listening spread through your whole skin. The change in the hoofbeat when the trail goes from clay to gravel, the cold pooling in the low swales where the river fog gathers, washing over you like walking into a cellar. The smell of the water strengthening and fading as the trail swings toward the Carson and away again. The bay's ears, which you can just make out against the stars, swivelling like compass needles toward every jackrabbit and nightbird in 3 miles. Your knees do most of the talking. Between your knees the mochila's forward pouches ride stiff and heavy, and you have already learned 19 days into this life that you can feel the mail, not read it. Feel it. Feel that it is there, that its weight rides true, that the locks lie flat. Somewhere against your left knee, wrapped in oiled silk, are bank drafts and death notices and love letters and newspaper dispatches, marked for the San Francisco papers, and men in 2 cities you will never see have paid $5 a half ounce for the use of your knee. You are a piece of infrastructure. You are the wire before the wire. 11 miles out you make the first change at a swing station that is nothing but a dugout in a riverbank with a brush corral, kept by a silent Missourian and his more silent nephew. Swing stations are spaced 10 to 15 miles apart along the whole line, as far as a horse can run flat out and no farther, and they exist for 90 seconds at a time. You come in at a hand gallop, and the fresh horse is standing saddled, and you're off before the tired one stops moving. Mochila over your arm, 3 steps between horses, mochila down over the new horn, cinch checked with 1 pull, up, gone. The Missourian never says a word. His lantern is a coal oil can with holes punched in it. His nephew holds the fresh horse's head and stares at you every time, with an expression you've decided is either envy or pity, and you suspect the day you find out which, you'll have learned something about this job you'd rather not know. The fresh horse tonight is the little buckskin mare they call Sage, and your heart does a small, complicated thing when you see her, because Sage is the best horse on your division, and also the worst, depending on information available only to Sage. Hammer-headed, mean-eyed, Mustang-bred, 14 hands of opinion. The company bought 400 horses for this line, and paid up to $200 a head, 5 times what an ordinary saddle horse costs, army officers grumbling that the express outbid the cavalry. And then it bought Sage for $40 off a ragtown horse trader, because nobody else would have her. She has twice shied so hard at sage hens bursting from cover that she nearly put you in the rocks, but she does not tire, and she notices everything on the whole dark face of the earth, which is why she nearly puts you in the rocks, and there will come a night when what Sage notices will be the only thing keeping you on the list of living boys. Right now she flattens her ears, takes the bit like an insult, and runs. You have time to think in the long dark miles, and what you think about this particular night is the day they hired you, because tonight is the first anniversary of nothing at all and your mind is loose. Carson City, the 2nd week of March, mud to the ankle bone. A crowd of men and boys outside the Ormsby house, all come to see about the notice, and a man named Believer Roberts, superintendent of the Western Division, sitting behind a table with a ledger, looking over horseflesh and boy flesh with the same measuring eye. He'd been given 2 months to build his end of the line from nothing, buy the horses, build the stations, hire the men from the Sierra to Salt Lake. and he had the face of a man doing arithmetic in his sleep. He asked you 2 questions. Could you ride? Which he then made you prove on a half-broke grey in a pole corral, while 40 men watched and hoped you'd be thrown, that being the entertainment. And had you any family? And you said, no, sir, none. And he looked at you 1 beat longer than the question needed, and wrote your name in the ledger, and you understood even then, dimly, the way you understand weather coming, that your loneliness had just been appraised and found to be an asset. Then came the oath. You stood in a row of boys with your hand up and swore, before God, not to use profane language, not to drink intoxicating liquors, not to quarrel or fight with other employees of the company, and in all respects to conduct yourself honestly, to be faithful to your duties, so help you God. This is Alexander Major's doing. Of the 3 men who own this company, Russell, Majors and Waddell, names strung together so long that out here they sound like one word, one distant 3-headed creature that owns your days. Majors is the pious one, the freighting man, and every man and boy he has ever hired has sworn that oath, 5,000 bull-whackers before you. And with the oath came a Bible, a small one bound in calf, stamped in gilt, presented by Russell, Majors and Waddell. They say the firm bought 10,000 of them. Charlie Beckett claims the oath, and the Bible cost the company more than the pistols, and that of the 2, the Bibles have killed fewer riders. And that's the sort of joke that would cost him his position if the 3-headed creature could hear across 400 miles, which it cannot, which is the first thing everybody learns out here about the men who own things. Your Bible is in the tack shed at Willow Bend, wrapped in a flour sack with your mother's brass thimble, and $11 on a shelf above your saddle tree. You're not a praying boy especially, but you've not thrown it away, and you notice that neither has Charlie, who jokes, and neither has anyone. And in your left boot, folded down to the size of a playing card, soft as cloth now from wear, you carry the notice. The one off the Carson City wall, wanted, young, skinny, wiry fellows. You could not say why you keep it. Other boys keep a girl's ribbon or a lucky piece. You keep the only paper in the world with your description on it, the closest thing you own to a document proving somebody, somewhere, asked for a boy exactly like you, orphans preferred. You keep it the way other men keep their discharge papers or their letters from home. You have no letters from home. You carry 200 of other people's. Dawn comes on somewhere past the second change, and it comes the way it always comes out here, which no one back in the States would believe. First the sky goes grey-green over the eastern ranges, mountains stacked behind mountains like torn paper, and the cold gets worse instead of better. One last vindictive hour of it, and your hands on the reins are carved wood. Then the light comes up the colour of peach flesh and pours across the desert floor, and the whole alkali flat ahead of you catches fire, pink and gold, miles of it, and every grey-green clump of sage throws a shadow 40 feet long, and for about 10 minutes, the ugliest country God ever forgot to finish is the most beautiful place on the round earth. Your breath and the horse's breath trail behind you in banners. A herd of antelope lifts out of a swale and flows away north, 24 white rumps like blown paper, and you, Silas Reed, 16, chapped, saddle-galled, running on 4 hours of sleep and 1 tin cup of coffee, find that you are grinning like a fool into the wind. Because here is the thing about this terrible job that you can never quite say out loud, not even to Charlie. They pay you $100 a month, and you would do it for nothing. Every boy on the line would. Not one of you would ever confess it, because $100 a month is the first respect the world has ever paid most of you. But in the pink light, flying. 11 days news from New York riding on your knees and antelope running off your flank, you know what you are. You're the fastest thing in America. You're a 16-year-old nobody, and the whole invented world, presidents, banks, newspapers, gold, cannot move its own words across this desert 1 hour faster than your body can carry them. The station at Sand Springs shows ahead, a smudge of smoke rising off the flat at the foot of a mountain made entirely of sand. 6 miles yet. You ease the horse a notch and eat the biscuit Ada Clute tied in your saddle strings. Bacon grease gone cold and lovely on your tongue, and the last of the night's cold burns off your shoulders. 85 miles is your run. Willow Bend to Cold Springs and, after a sleep, back again. 10 to 15 miles is a horse's run. 2 minutes is a change. 10 days is the whole line. Ocean to ocean of land. Everything out here is measured, everything cut to fit, the entire fantastic machine running on numbers, except one number, the biggest one, the one nobody says, what it costs, what all of it costs, the 400 horses at $200, the 150-odd stations, the $100 boys, 500 men strung across a wilderness eating flour that cost more than beefsteak by the time an ox train hauls it out here. You're 16. You can figure freight. You've never once done this sum. Men who have done it are, at this exact moment, 1,800 miles east of you, sitting in offices in Leavenworth, Kansas and Washington City, sweating through their collars in the springtime, moving money that does not exist from one ledger to another, an hour ahead of the men they owe. But the sun is up now, and Sand Springs is close enough to smell the smoke, and nobody has told the horses, and nobody has told you. The mail goes through. You know your scripture. You just don't know yet who wrote it, or why. The mountain of sand deserves a word because there is nothing else like it between here and the Atlantic, and because it sings. It stands just north of the Sand Springs Station, a single dune 600 feet high and 2 miles long, pale gold smooth as poured cream, heaped against the rocky hills by 10,000 years of wind that scours the dry bed of an ancient lake and drops its cargo in this one place. The first time you saw it, you thought it was a trick of distance, a cloud lying down. The emigrants on the wagon road call it Sand Mountain, having used up their imagination somewhere back around the 200th mile of sagebrush, and you cannot blame them. And on certain days, when the wind combs it just so, or when a sheet of sand lets go and slides, the whole mountain groans. A low note, deeper than any organ, that you feel in your breastbone before your ears agree it exists. The same way you feel hoofbeats through a floor, the desert's own trick played back at you by a heap of sand. The Paiute people have known about the singing for longer than anyone can say. The station hands, who have known about it for 3 weeks, mostly hate it. Milt, the Sand Springs keeper, says a mountain has no business talking and refuses to discuss the matter further. Sand Springs Station itself would cure any man of romance about this line. Walls of stacked stone, no roof to speak of. The spring behind it so foul with alkali that men drink it strained through a rag and curse, and horses drink it and curse in horse. Everything at Sand Springs is gritty, the bacon, the blankets, the men's eyelids. You change horses there in the shadow of the loveliest, most useless singing mountain on the continent, and you are always, every single time, glad to leave, and some part of you looks back over your shoulder every single time. That's this whole country in one lesson. Nothing out here is good. Half of it is magnificent. By early afternoon you raise Cold Springs, the east end of your run, a real station, stone-walled and square, set where the hills begin to gather toward the passes, with a spring of actual sweet water that tastes, after 85 miles of alkali, like something that ought to cost money. You hand the mochila to the next boy in the relay, a Kentuckian named Roy who rides the murderous stretch further east and who has never in your hearing completed a sentence, being asleep or leaving, always one or the other. 2 minutes. He's gone eastward, dust hanging where he was, and then, for you, the strangest part of this strange employment, nothing. A meal of beans and salt pork eaten standing, because sitting has become a technical challenge. Sleep in daylight in your boots, on a bench identical to the bench at Willow Bend, while the station men move around you as if you were freight, which you are. Freight that eats. Tomorrow, or tonight if the westbound is early, you'll wear the next mochila back the way you came, and every mile of this will happen again in reverse, and that is your entire life now, an 85-mile pendulum swinging between 2 stone rooms, twice a week, at the speed of a running horse, for as long as your neck holds out. Home, insofar as an orphan on a pendulum has one, is Willow Bend. And Willow Bend is worth knowing, because you will remember its every splinter until you die. 1 room, 18 feet by 24, logs chinked with mud, a floor of whipsawed plank that Clute is proud of. Most stations make do with dirt, and a stone hearth at the west end. Along the walls, the flour barrels and the grain sacks stacked on stones to spite the mice, who are not spited. The harness pegs, the rifle rack with Clute's big sharps and 2 company carbines, the water butt, a shelf of tin plates scoured with sand until they shine like bad silver. By the door, nailed flat to the log where every rider can see it going out, the company's printed schedule, 10 days Missouri to California, its columns of stations and hours as calm and mad as anything ever printed. Behind a blanket curtain at the east end, the Clute's bed. Above, in a loft you reach by pegs driven in the wall, the straw ticks where you and Charlie sleep on the nights you're both in, head to foot, because the loft is 7 feet wide and privacy is a luxury nobody at your altitude of the world can afford. Charlie kicks in his sleep and claims you snore like a stone boat on gravel. You share anyway. Everyone shares. In the whole territory, sleeping alone is a thing rich men do. Out the door, the tack shed, the pole corral with its remuda of company horses, the hay yard Clute guards like a paymaster, because hay hauled from the Carson Valley costs $60 the ton out here, and the horses eat money morning and night, and past the corral, down the rise, the river in its willows, making the one sound in this whole country that never stops. Ada Clute runs the inside of the station the way her husband runs the outside, which is to say absolutely. A spare, quick woman around 40, 12 years younger than Clute, out of Vermont by way of half the continent, with faded ginger hair and a burn scar across the back of one hand from a life spent 8 inches from other people's fires. She cooks for the family, the riders, the stock tender, and every company man, express passenger or half-starved emigrant the road washes up at her door, on a sheet-iron stove in the lean-to, out of flour, saleratus, beans, bacon, dried apples and vinegar, and out of that short, sad list she produces food men talk about 40 miles away. Her biscuits go in your saddle strings every run you ride. She has never once said anything sentimental to you about it, or about anything. She darned the elbow of your dead predecessor's buckskin jacket in February and handed it back with one word. There. You would, though it embarrasses you to know it about yourself, ride through fire for her. The stock tender is a Paiute man of maybe 50 years called Washoe John, which is not his name. The whites of this country hand out names like John and Captain and Winnemucca Charlie, the way they hand out everything, without asking, and the men who receive them wear them the way you'd wear a borrowed coat for practical purposes, without mistaking them for their own skin. You asked him once, early badly, what his real name was. He looked at you for a moment, not unkindly, and said, in better English than Charlie's, that his name was in his own language, and left it there, and you had the sense to leave it there too. His people are Numu, the people in their tongue, northern Paiutes in the agent's ledgers, and they have lived in this basin, which the emigrant guides call a desert waste, for longer than there has been in England, wintering on stored pine nuts from the mountain groves, taking fish from the lakes with weirs their grandfathers' built, moving through this country on a calendar so old and exact it makes the company's printed schedule look like a child's guess. The company hires such men at many stations to tend stock, because they are the best hands with horses anybody has, and pays them less than it pays anybody, and Washoe John takes the wage and the flour and keeps his own counsel. He has a wife and grandchildren somewhere north toward Pyramid Lake that he visits between mails. He thinks the express is the funniest thing he's ever seen. He has never said so. It's in the set of his mouth when the relay comes through. All that thunder and lather and shouting, a boy half killing himself and 6 horses to move paper. Once, watching you staggering off the East Run, so tired you missed the latch twice, he observed, to the corral generally, that the whites had discovered a way to make the fastest man on earth arrive too tired to speak, and went back to graining the mare. But it was Washoe John who taught you to read the desert, in the slack afternoons of your first weeks, and nobody on the company's rolls taught you anything half so likely to keep you alive. Dust, first. Everything that moves in this country flies a flag of dust, and every flag is different. A freight outfit raises a slow tan wall that hangs and drifts. The stagecoach raises a running plume, low and steady. Antelope raise almost nothing, a pale smoke gone in a breath. A single rider raises a thin thread. Horsemen, several moving fast, raise separate threads that twist into one rope. He walked you out past the corral and had you name the dust on the emigrant road until you stopped guessing wrong. That's a wagon train. That's the stage. Late. That's loose stock. Likely strayed. That's riders. Wind ruins everything, he said. Learn the wind first, then the dust. And smoke, second, on an afternoon when a cooking fire somewhere upriver put a grey thread in the sky. Smoke tells you more than dust, he said. Cook fire sits low and goes blue-grey and steady. A man tends it. Grass fire runs and browns. And a burning building. He paused, in the way he had so that the words landed where he wanted them. A burning building is black at the bottom of the smoke and makes a column, because a building is a thing that stands still and dies in one place. If you ever see standing black smoke on this road, he said, don't ride toward it to help. Ride wide, look long and count the horses first. You laughed, because you were 16 and it was April. He didn't. In the evenings, when the eastbound has gone through and the westbound isn't due, the station settles into a quiet that people who have never lived in one room in a wilderness would not recognize as happiness. The stove ticking, Ada's needle, Clute at the table with the station ledger and the company's way-bills, moving his lips over the arithmetic, his square beard lit orange by the candle. Hay, grain, flour, freight, all of it owed, none of it paid, though you don't know that part yet, Charlie cleaning a carbine he has never fired at anything but a coyote, telling lies about girls in Ohio, the horses shifting in the corral, the river. And on one such evening in late April, Charlie, oiling the lock, says the word for the first time in your hearing, telegraph. Fellow at Buckland's told him they've carried the wire over the mountains from California as far as Genoa now, poking it along toward Carson City, and that back in the States there's talk in Congress of a wire all the way across, ocean to ocean, and then, says Charlie, grinning, mimicking the fellow at Buckland's, it's done for you pony boys, done overnight, the lightning don't stop to change horses. Clute doesn't look up from the ledger. Congress, he says, in the voice other men use for saying mud, has been talking about that wire for 10 years. It'll be 10 more. Stringing poles across what you rode today, freighting wire and glass, and men across 2,000 miles of this. He wets his thumb, turns a page. You'll be an old man, Beckett. Your grandchildren will carry this mail. Charlie winks at you. You laugh, and the stove ticks, and somewhere out east in the dark your relay is running, and it is all, every word of it, the purest comfort, the way only a thing everyone believes can be. The wire will cross this exact desert, on poles you will personally watch go up, in 18 months. You should understand what the road is like this spring, because when I say the trail runs through empty country, I need you to understand what empty means in the Utah Territory in 1860. And it does not mean what you think. The land is empty. The road is a circus. 10 months ago, up on the shoulder of a mountain 25 miles west of your station, some miners chasing gold finally had a look at the heavy, blue-black mud that kept fouling their rockers, the stuff they'd been cursing and shoveling aside for a year, and sent a sample over the Sierra to be assayed. The mud came back worth $3,000 a ton in silver. They call the find the Comstock Lode, after a man who talked his way into a share of it, and it is, though nobody can prove it yet, the richest body of silver ore anyone has found on this continent, ever. The camp sprawling above it got its name, the story goes, when a drunken miner christened the ground with a broken bottle of whiskey and his own name, and so the place where half the money in the West will be dug for the next 20 years is called, after a staggering man nobody respected, Virginia City. And so all winter and all spring up the river road past your station's own front door has come the rush. The washer rush, they call it, and it is a parade with no end and no dignity whatsoever. Miners from played-out California diggings walking east, the wrong way, the direction their own fathers' bones point against, with everything they own on one mule. Speculators in town coats riding mules they plainly met last Tuesday. Freight outfits, the big Murphy wagons doubled and tripled, hauling stamp mill iron and whiskey barrels and window glass behind 12-yoke ox teams, the bullwhackers walking alongside cracking whips you can hear a mile off, profane beyond the reach of art, gamblers, assayers, women, a few, riding in the freight wagons with their faces wrapped against the dust, a man with a printing press, a man with 400 cats in crates, bound for the mining camps, where a proven mouser sells for $10, and that man, you will come to understand, has done the arithmetic of the age more clearly than anyone. In a silver rush, sell cats. The noise of the road never quite stops now, even at night. Whips and chain harness and wagon brakes screaming down the grades, and stray notes of concertina music, and men hailing each other across the sage in 6 languages. Clute stands in the station door watching the traffic some evenings, thumbs in his belt, with the expression of a man watching a river flood past carrying furniture. Every 4th outfit stops wanting hay, which he will not sell, having a corral of company horses that eat $60 hay morning and night, and every fourth man of those calls him a robber, and Clute receives the word robber with the calm of a man who has been called worse by better in 9 years of freighting in this exact tone over this exact hay. The mail threads through all of it. That's the part nobody east of the Missouri would believe. The fastest communication system in the hemisphere, and a rabble of ox trains and cat salesmen share one set of ruts. Twice a week you come through at a gallop with a mochila, and the bullwhackers curse you affectionately and the emigrants stare, and now and then some fool tries to race you on a grain-fed town horse for the honour of the thing, and for a quarter mile he has it, and then he doesn't. Where the road and the river argue there are fords, and the fords this spring are ugly. The Carson is running full with Sierra snowmelt, cold as charity, dragging its gravel downstream in a sound like a giant grinding his teeth, and the emigrant crossings are churned into pits of quicksand mud that will swallow a wagon to the box and hold a struggling ox down until it drowns. You cross at the upper ford on your run, where the bottom is cobble, and even there you've learned the trick of it. Quarter into the current, never straight across. Give the horse her head entirely. Keep your boots free of the stirrups in case she goes down, and hold the mochila's weight up with your knees because the letters are wrapped in oiled silk. But oiled silk is a promise made by a man in an office, and the river has drowned better promises. The water comes to your thighs at the deep line. It hits like a swung plank. Every crossing, some part of your mind stands aside and notes, in a voice not entirely your own, that $5 half ounce is being earned right now by a boy's numb legs in snowmelt, and that the men who set that price have never once felt this river, and that this is probably the usual way of the world, and then you're across and the mare shakes like a dog, nearly unseating you, and you ride on with your boots full of the Sierra Nevada. It's the lower crossings, the emigrant fords, that keep the buzzards fed. You've counted 11 drowned oxen on the bars below Ragtown since the thaw. Ragtown itself, the first water after the 40-mile desert, where the westbound emigrants stagger to the river and drape their washing on every bush, hence the name, is a single trading shack in a graveyard of abandoned property. Wagon tires, dead stock, furniture hauled from Illinois and given at last to the sand. A piano once, they say, standing out in the sage where the oxen died, going out of tune, alone, for years. And 8 miles down the river from your own station, there is Williams Station. And Williams Station is a different kind of ugly, and you need to see it now in daylight in April, because of what is coming in May. It isn't a pony station. It's a road ranch, a low adobe and log trading post on the river, kept by the Williams brothers, that sells the emigrant traffic flour at $1 a pound, and hay, and above all whiskey, the frontier kind, raw alcohol cut with river water, and fired up with tobacco plug and cayenne. 2 bits the tin cup, and worth, by Clute's assay, the powder to blow it to hell. Every road in the territory has such places, the way a hide has ticks. The traffic stops there. Teamsters, drifters, discharged miners, men whose names change by the season. Passing riders water there because the river bank is easy, and you have done it. And each time there is a particular feeling on the back of your neck, standing in the yard while men you don't know look you over from the shade, pricing your horse. Clute has told you, without decoration, water and ride on. Don't play cards there, don't eat there, don't be there after dark. When you asked what the Williamses had done, exactly, he was quiet for a moment, shoeing hammer in his hand, and then said that some men keep a bad house the way some wells give bad water, and you don't ask a well its reasons, You just note which one makes people sick. What you hear later, in pieces from Teamsters and from the quiet of Washoe John, is worse than cards. The whiskey goes where whiskey is not lawful to go. Sharp trades, and worse than sharp. With the Numu families who camp seasonally along the river as they have forever. This is their river, though every white paper in the territory has begun pretending otherwise. Insults given casually, the way men give them when they believe there is no bill coming, all through this dry winter and hungry spring, while the rush pours up the road eating the country bare, the pine nut groves cut for mine timbers and firewood, the game shot off or scattered, the fish taken, the grass grazed to dirt by 10,000 emigrant animals. The ledger between the two peoples of this basin has been filling up, line by line, insult by insult, hunger by hunger, and no one on the white side of it is keeping the accounts, because it has not occurred to them that this is the kind of ledger that gets settled. Washoe John goes north more often now between mails to his family toward Pyramid Lake, and comes back with less to say each time. In the last week of April, graining the horses at evening, he stands for a long while looking at the northeastern sky, where there is nothing but the usual savage stars, and you come to the corral rail and stand with him, because you have learned that his silences have shapes, and this one has a bad shape. There was a council, he says at last, at the lake, bands coming in from all over, Smoke Creek, Black Rock, Walker River, young men from everywhere, angry, more every day. He grains the mare. The old men counsel patience, he says. Numaga counsels patience. You know the name by now. A war chief of the lake people, a big man in every sense who has seen California and understands, as the young men do not, how many whites there are. A man fasting and arguing, they say, day after day, against his own warriors' fury, telling them the whites are as the stars, as the sand, that this war can be started by anyone and finished by no one. Numaga is right, Washoe John says. He hangs the grain sack on the rail. And it will not matter, he says, because patience is a rope, and a rope has an end, and there are white men on this river hauling on it with both hands. He does not say which white men. He does not need to. Every one of you standing at that rail is thinking of the same low adobe on the same easy bank, 8 miles down the river, with its 2-bit whiskey and its shaded pricing eyes. The mare noses the empty sack. The river says the one thing it says. You go into supper, and the biscuits are good, and Charlie tells a lie about Ohio, and nobody speaks of it again that night. And April, the only whole month of peace this line will ever know from its first day to its last, quietly ends. In the first days of May, between your runs, Clute takes you to Carson City with the wagon for flour, grain and horseshoes, and that trip is worth telling entire, because it is the day you first hear the secret said out loud and fail to understand it, both on the same afternoon. Payday comes first, though, the evening before, and payday deserves its own small ceremony in the telling, because you will remember it later, the way a man remembers the last warm day of a year. Mr. Deems is the company's agent for this stretch of the division, a narrow, glove-wearing man who travels the road in a buggy with a strong box under the seat and a Mexican outrider named Nobody You've Ever Heard Say. And he arrives at Willow Bend on the 3rd of May, sets the strong box on Ada's scrubbed table, and counts out wages in gold coin. Yours come to $100, 5 double eagles, and he slides them across the boards with a banker's flick, and the sound they make, that dense, small, absolute sound of gold on wood, twice, 3 times, 5, is a sound you will find yourself listening for in memory all the rest of this story. because you will not hear it many more times. Deems also pays Clute the station accounts, or some of the station accounts, and there is a low conversation at the table's end. Clute's thick finger on the ledger, Deems' glove tapping, phrases surfacing like fish. The hay contractor drawn on Leavenworth's 60 days presented again. That mean nothing to you. Clute's face through it is the face he wears shoeing a horse that might kick. Afterward, Deems takes coffee, praises Ada's dried apple pie in the language of a man praising a hotel, and rolls off north toward the next station with his strongbox and his outrider. And Clute stands in the door watching the buggy shrink and says, to himself, to the road, in the tone of a man quoting scripture he doesn't believe, 60 days. Carson City next morning. Understand what Carson City is in May of 1860. A 2-year-old town of maybe 1,000 souls that fully expects to be the capital of a state that does not exist. Laid out around a dusty plaza by men who left room for a Capitol building, the way a boy leaves room on his slate for sums he can't do yet. Wood frame stores, adobe saloons, the Ormsby House Hotel, corrals, one street that matters. But it is the biggest place you've stood in since Sacramento, and after 6 weeks of one log room and the wind, it roars like Rome. The plaza is a tangle of freight outfits loading for Virginia City. Silver Talk runs the sidewalks like spilled quicksilver. Feet, leads, assays, the Afia, the Mexican, ounces to the ton. Men who cannot afford breakfast trading claims on paper worth thousands of invisible dollars. In the assay office window sits a silver brick the size of a Bible with its weight and fineness chalked on it, and men stop all day to look at it, silent, the way they'd look at a saint's bone. Clute does his buying with the joyless speed of a man who knows what everything ought to cost and what it costs here. Flour is at $30 the barrel, twice what Sacramento pays. The rush eats everything, and the freighter's whip set the price of civilization. While the wagon is loading, he sends you down the street to the express office with the station's waybills, and it is there, waiting on a bench, that you get your lesson. 2 men at the counter, town coats, one of them a banker from the look of his hands, soft as Deems, but confident where Deems are careful. They are talking because everyone in Carson City is always talking about money, and you hear the words Pony Express, and your ears do what ears do. Finest thing in the country, one says, 10 days to the States. It'll make the central route. It'll make this town. Make the town, maybe, the banker says. It won't make a dime for the men that run it. And then, in the pleasant voice of a man dealing facts like cards, he deals out one by one onto the counter of your understanding the arithmetic. No one at your station has ever said in your hearing that the letters at $5 the half ounce come through in bundles a man could carry in his hat, a few hundred a trip on a good trip, that the running of it, 500 men's wages, 400 grain-fed horses, 150 stations provisioned by ox freight at 25 cents a pound, eats, by any sane figuring, $1,000 a day and better, that every letter you have ever carried, every tissue paper whisper you have ever worn across the river and the cold, costs Russell, Majors and Waddell some 3 times what any customer pays for it, that the firm is running the fastest, proudest thing in America at a dead loss, on purpose, every single day, and always has been, since the first horse left the first station. Why, says the first man, would anyone in his right mind do that? For the contract, says the banker, and you sit on your bench with the way-bills on your knee, 16, invisible, listening the way you have learned to listen to hoofbeats through a floor, while he explains it, and the machine you belong to turns itself inside out in your understanding and becomes a different machine. The mail contract. The Great Overland Mail Subsidy. $600,000 a year of government money. Ride south right now with the Butterfield stages the long way, through Texas, 25 days around by El Paso, because powerful southern men in Washington want the mail road south, and powerful northern men want it central, and the country, though the banker does not quite say this part, is quietly coming apart along exactly that seam. The Pony Express carries letters at a ruinous loss for one reason. It is an advertisement, a demonstration, written in horseflesh and boys, that the central route works in all seasons. 10 days, through the snow, through the desert, look at it run. Russell Majors and Waddell are spending money they do not have, the banker says, tapping the counter, to persuade Congress to give them money it has not voted, and every banker west of Salt Lake knows their paper, their notes, their drafts, the 60-day promises men like Deems hand to hay contractors, and quietly discounts it. 40 cents on the dollar, he says. I've seen their acceptances traded at 40 cents. His companion whistles. And the riders, he says, half laughing. Do the boys know they're galloping for a busted flush? The boys, says the banker, in the tone of a man closing a ledger, are paid in gold, and gold spends the same out of any drowning man's pocket. Then the clerk calls him, and the two of them go to the counter about their business, and you sit there with your 5 double eagles suddenly conscious in your pocket, feeling the exact sensation of a boy who has been shown the underside of a bridge while standing on it. You should be angrier than you are. What you mostly are is confused, and in a way you will be ashamed of later and should not be thrilled, because a secret is a possession, and you have just come into property. You do not really believe the bridge can fall. You are part of the fastest thing in America. You have outrun antelope in the pink dawn. Solvency is a word from a grey world east of the mountains. 60 days, says Klute's voice somewhere at the bottom of your mind, in scripture tone. You file it all away, the way you file the feel of a trail you've ridden once in the dark. One more thing happens in Carson City, and you need to hear it, because it shows you what the $5 letters are worth to the men who can't afford them. Walking back to the wagon, you're stopped gently by a man you take at first for a preacher. Clean black coat, kind eyes, who has marked your buckskin and your spurs and knows exactly what you are. He walks a friendly half-block with you, talking of the weather, and then, in the same friendly voice, offers you $20 a trip, a fifth of your monthly wage every run, to carry a few letters outside the mochila. Under your shirt, he suggests. Mining letters, time matters, no harm in it, the company never the wiser, the postage saved split like gentlemen. And the thing is, it would be easy. The mochila's pouches are locked and way-billed, but your shirt is your own, and half the express company's fortune leaks through exactly this hole. Everyone knows the stage passengers carry pocket mail. Everyone knows the law against private expresses is a joke nobody reads. $20 a trip. You feel the shape of the money, the way you'd feel a horse gather itself under you. Then you hear yourself say no, and say it again, walking faster, and you're surprised to discover, examining yourself later in the wagon beside Klute with the flour barrels drumming. Why? It isn't the oath exactly, though the oath is in it. It's the mochila. It's that the whole mad structure of your life. The 2 minutes, the singing mountain, the river at your thighs, Ada's biscuits in the saddle strings, the antelope dawn, hangs off one plain idea, that what rides on your knees rides honest, and that idea is the only inheritance anyone has ever offered you, and you find at the price of $20 a trip that you are not selling. orphans preferred. Maybe this is why, you think, jolting home westward into the red evening. Not just that nobody grieves, that a boy with nothing will die before he'll sell the one thing he's been given to hold. You're half right. You will learn the other half in a newspaper in the winter, and it will change the way you remember this entire spring. That night in the loft, Charlie asks what the city was like, and you say, loud. You do not tell him about the banker, and you cannot say why not, except that saying it out loud in the station, with Clute's ledger on the table below and Ada's stove ticking, would feel like carrying something in under your shirt. 3 days later, it is the 7th of May. The news comes to Willow Bend the way all news comes now, at a gallop. But this gallop is wrong, and everyone in the station knows it is wrong before a word is said, because it comes from the west, at the wrong hour, on a horse being used up without mercy. It is one of Buckland's men, hatless, and what he shouts from the yard, while the horse turns under him, and the Clutes stand in the door, and you stand at the corral rail with a hoof-pick in your hand, is this. William Station is burned. The men there are dead. 3 of them, 5 of them, nobody knows. The Williams brothers' place, burned to the coals, found by the surviving brother come back from Buckland's to a smoking yard. Paiutes, he shouts. It's war, he shouts. They're killing everybody on the river, and he has gone west again to carry that sentence down the road the way a spark carries down a fuse. What you feel first, and you will never tell anyone this, is the floor of the world trembling, the way the bench planks tremble under a coming horse. Something enormous is arriving. You cannot see it yet. You can only feel it in the boards of everything you stand on. Clute takes charge of the yard with a freighting man's economy. Horses into the near corral. The sharps loaded and set by the door, the carbines checked. Water butts filled. Ada, without one wasted word, begins the cooking a siege would want, and through all of it, at the rail, Washer John stands very still, looking down the river to where the smoke of William Station is now faintly, actually visible against the southern sky, standing black at the bottom of it, in a column, exactly as described, a building dying in one place, and his face is the face of a man watching a rope, hauled on for a year by men with both hands, finally part. What actually happened at William Station you will learn only in pieces, over months, and some pieces never. But the piece that matters, the piece the newspapers will bury under war cry headlines, and the old men of the river will state plainly for the rest of their lives, is this. It began with the Williams men, not with the Paiutes. 2 Numu women, girls some say, taken and held at that station, and their male kin coming to ask for them and being laughed at. And what was done there was the kind of thing for which men are hanged when the law can be troubled to notice the dead. The party that came at last and burned the place and killed the men in it was led by kin of the taken girls. Numaga, who had fasted and argued for peace until that day, heard the news and said, and even the white accounts will carry this sentence, because sentences like this survive. There is no longer any use for counsel. No use for counsel. What there is now on both sides of the river is fear, and fear does the rest, and fear needs no reasons once it is mounted. By the 9th of May the road is running backward. All that spring flood of rushes and freight comes boiling down out the country, the way water runs out of a cracked bowl. Virginia City and Carson City in a panic that feeds on itself, silver claims abandoned, mills stopped, families forted up in half-built stone buildings, every rumour doubling every hour. Willow Bend sits in the middle of it with the mail still coming, because the mail is still coming, and you make a run east on the 10th with your heart in your boots the whole 85 miles, past Sand Mountain groaning in the wind like the world's conscience, and hand off to Roy the Kentuckian, who for once is neither asleep nor leaving, and who says, completing his first full sentence in your acquaintance, "Watch the low ground going home, boy." On the 12th of May, 105 white men ride north from the Carson towns to punish the Paiutes under a militia major named William Ormsby, the same Ormsby whose hotel you stood outside of in March with your hand up, swearing not to swear. They are clerks and miners and speculators on borrowed horses, brave and ignorant, certain of an easy time. At the big bend of the Truckee, in the river bottoms below Pyramid Lake, Numaga's warriors, who have been fighting horseback on this ground since before any man present was born, fold around them like a closing hand. It is not a battle, it is a lesson with the tuition paid in men. 76 of the 105 never come back. Ormsby dies in the retreat. It is, though no one in the shouting territory says it this way, the worst defeat white men have yet suffered in all the long ugly wars of the far west, administered in an afternoon by the people the road had priced at nothing. The news reaches you, of course, by pony. Everything reaches you by pony. That is the terrible privilege of this year of your life. The continent's nervous system runs through your knees. The eastbound rider who carries the Pyramid Lake dispatches through Willow Bend that week is a boy you know, and his face as he swings down is the colour of the alkali flats, and he says nothing at all in his 2 minutes, and what is in the locked pouches under your neighbour's knees as he runs it east is the name of every man on that casualty list, riding to widows in Missouri at 250 miles a day. And now the line itself is in the war, because the line is made of the two things a war party needs, horses and remote men. East of you, in the long lonely reaches, the stations begin to burn. Word comes west in fragments, station by station, each fragment a place you have personally slept or watered. Stock runoff at Dry Creek. Simpson's Park, burned. A keeper dead here, a hand dead there. Men you have handed a mochila to. Men who owned one kettle and a coal oil lantern with holes punched in it. Roy carries the mail east into that darkness twice, and comes back the second time with an arrow burn along his forearm he will not discuss. And the third week of May the division stops pretending. The eastbound mail is held. For the first time since the 3rd of April, the mail does not go through. You would not have believed how that sentence lands in a station silence. The mail does not go through. It is like hearing that the river has agreed to stop. Washer John leaves on the 15th of May. He does it without ceremony, at first light, his blanket roll on his shoulder, and Clute meets him in the yard, and the two men stand for a moment in the cold looking at each other. And Clute takes out wages owed and some beyond owed, and puts the coin in his hand, and neither of them says anything you can hear. His family is north, in the war country, in the path of the Second Army that everyone knows is coming, the real one, with regulars and howitzers that will not lose. He's going to them. Of course he is going to them. At the gate he pauses by you where you're pretending to mend a cinch, and looks at you a moment and says, "Standing black smoke. Ride wide. Look long. Count the horses. Say it. You say it." He nods once, the way he nods at a horse that has finally learned a thing, and walks north up the river through the willows, and the war has now taken from you, personally, the first thing it will take, and it is a teacher. At the end of May comes your worst ride, and I will tell it to you plainly, the way you can never quite tell it to anyone. The division tries to push the held mail through in a convoy of sorts. Riders doubled where possible, the schedule abandoned, just get it east. And your leg of it is Willow Bend to Cold Springs, on Sage, with a spare colt in your belt that Clute hands you without commentary, its weight all wrong all morning against your hip like a hand. The road east is empty as the moon. No freight, no rushes, no dust flags anywhere on the whole grey-green face of the world. And the emptiness is worse than any traffic, because for the first time in your life this country is not indifferent to you. It is watching. Twice you swing wide of low ground you have galloped through 100 times, here in a Kentucky drawl. Watch the low ground. At Sand Springs the men are forted behind their stone walls and come out one at a time, rifle first. The mountain, in a north wind, moans. It is past Sand Springs on the long bare stretch toward Cold Springs that Sage stops, not shies. Stops, plants her 4 feet, throws her hammerhead high, ears locked forward on the notch ahead where the trail bends between 2 rises, and stands trembling like a struck tuning fork. And you, 16 years old and $400 of company urgency shouting in your training, do the one intelligent thing of your young life. You believe your $40 horse. You leave the trail. You take the long way, wide to the south, off the track, over the rotten ground, a mile of hard, slow going, with your heart walking up and down your throat. And you see nothing at the notch, and you never see anything at the notch, and you will never know, all your life, whether Sage saved it or spooked at Sage hens. That is the truth of such country, and I will not decorate it. You get the fear entire. You're not owed the answer. But when you raise Cold Springs an hour on, you understand what the answer would have looked like. Smoke, standing black at the bottom, thinning grey up top, a column above the station going straight into the windless afternoon, a building dying in one place. You do what you were taught by the man the war took from you first. Wide, long, count, and you lie on a rise with the dry grass printing your cheek for the better part of an hour, watching, and the count of horses at Cold Springs is none. The corral is open and empty. The stock run off to the last head. The roofline of the station shows black ribs. Nothing moves but the smoke and one raven, and no living thing in this world is as calm as that raven, and you hate it with your whole heart, and you are crying. You notice at some point, without sound, which the desert does not remark on. There were 2 hands left holding Cold Springs. One got away west that morning, and you will meet him at Buckland's in July, with his beard gone white at 30. The other is in the yard, and you find him when you finally ride down, and I will give him to you as you actually got him, which is not as a horror but as a weight. A man face down in the churned dirt he swept every morning, near the spring of sweet water that made this the one good station on your run, with the wind moving his shirt, patiently, as if trying to wake him. You do not know him well. He mended a stirrup leather for you in April and would not take pay. You are the first of his people to find him, and the last thing you can do in the world for him is also the first grown thing you have ever done. You get the spade from the ruin of the tack shed, and you dig in the ground he kept, while Sage stands hip-shot and watches, and it takes you past sundown, and your hands, already a rider's hands, come out of it something older. You have no words for over him, and then you remember that you do, that you've carried them all spring in a flour sack on a shelf, and that a copy of the same words, calf-bound, gilt-stamped, presented by Russell, Majors and Waddell, is in half the saddlebags on this line. You do not have the book with you. You have what your mother read aloud in Sacramento the winter before the fever, which turns out, when you open your mouth over a mounded grave in the enormous dusk, to still be in you. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down. Your voice sounds like somebody else's, and you get all the way through it. To the end, surely goodness and mercy, all the days forever, and the first stars are out by then, savage as ever, and sage shifts her feet, and the spring keeps making its small sweet sound that no one now is left to drink by. You ride back west through the whole of that night, wide of every notch, and the mail is still under your knees, undelivered, because there was no one left alive to hand it to. That is the sentence of everything in this story that I most need you to keep. There was no one left alive to hand it to. The mail does not always go through. Sometimes the mail comes home with a boy at 4 a.m, and the boy cannot say anything, and the station master's wife takes one look and does not ask him anything, and sets down in front of him, because it is what there is, warm biscuits, and the boy puts his face in his hands. For most of a month after that, the line lies still. It is the strangest month of your year, the hell-breath month. No mochila, no 2 minutes. The great pendulum of your life hangs stopped at the bottom of its arc, and you discover that a rider with no mail is just a boy at a station, mending harness, hauling water, sleeping at night like ordinary people, and that you have somehow become a person to whom sleeping at night feels unnatural. In the corrals, the horses go restless and fat. Letters pile up in San Francisco and St. Joseph, they say, in canvas sacks, thousands of dollars of urgency going quietly stale, and the newspapers back in the States, which spent April calling the pony the wonder of the age, spend June asking pointed questions about whether the central route is safe at all, which is to say, asking the exact question the whole ruinous advertisement was invented to answer. In Washington, Southern men smile. That is what a burned station is. In an office, an argument. Out here it is simpler. Out here the war winds down the way weather does. The Second Army goes north at the end of May. Regulars from California this time, artillery, and 700 volunteers under a Texas Ranger named Jack Hayes, who does not make Ormsby's kind of mistake. And at the beginning of June there is a second fight in the same river bottoms, and this time it is the Numu who fall back, fighting rearguard, into the high desert north of the lake, scattering as they have always scattered, into country an army cannot eat in. Perhaps 25 of them die. Nobody honest counts. Then the army does what armies do when the enemy declines to be found, builds a fort and calls it a war concluded. The bands drift, hungry, through a burned-over summer. There is no treaty. There is never a treaty. There is only on both sides of the river a long subtraction. You think about Washoe John every single day of that month, north somewhere in the fighting country with his wife and his grandchildren, and you find you cannot make the arithmetic of your loyalties come out even. And I will tell you now, so you don't carry it the whole way. He lives. Hold that. You will not know it for 10 more weeks, and those are long weeks. But he lives. The mail moves again in the middle of June, with the army's shadow over it. The burned stations are rebuilt in stone. The company, whatever else is hollow in it, does this fast cruise and freight moving up the line within weeks. $75,000 it does not have going into walls and wells and replacement stock, a sum you will want to remember when we come to the winter. For a while, the riders go through the worst stretches with soldier escorts, which is a comedy once the fear thins. Dragoons on grain-fed government horses pounding along beside you for 10 miles, blowing, falling back, waving you on. The schedule, which the war broke, mends itself with a speed that still astonishes you. By July, the mail is running 10 days again as if nothing had happened, and the newspapers have their answer, and the answer is written where all this line's answers are written, in horseflesh and boys. And on a bluff above the Carson, 25 miles west of you near Bucklands, the fort goes up. Fort Churchill, adobe on stone, laid out in a great square around a parade ground, barracks and officers' quarters and magazines, blue uniforms and bugle calls in a valley that 8 months ago held nothing federal but the mail. It is the first thing built in your part of the world that admits in adobe that all of this, the road, the silver, the line, the whole roaring parade, is going to be permanent. You feel two ways about it riding past. Most people out here feel two ways about everything. It is in that long, quiet, mending summer, on an evening in July with the door open to the heat and the mosquitoes off the river, that Amos Clute finally tells you where he's been all these years, and what he knows, and it is the night you stop being a boy who works at his station and becomes something more like a son who is owed the truth. It starts with the ledger. It usually starts with the ledger. Deems has sent word ahead of his August round, and the word is thin. Payments to be partly in company drafts this quarter, the gold being wanted for the rebuilding. And Clute reads the letter twice and sets it down and is silent so long that Ada looks over from her mending. And then he says, "Not to you exactly. Not to anyone. I have seen this company's face before, when it takes this look. And because you are 16 and cannot help it, you ask, and because something in the summer or the burying year has decided it is time, he answers, 9 years a bullwhacker for the freighting firm, he tells you. Russell, Majors and Waddell were not born running ponies. They are the biggest freighting house in the West, the biggest there has ever been. 3,500 wagons, 40,000 oxen, 4,000 men on the road in a good season, hauling everything the army eats and shoots west of the Missouri. He walked beside those wagons from Leavenworth to Salt Lake, and back so many times, he says, that he could tell you where every creek crosses the road from memory in order both directions. And in 57, he was with the trains that went out to supply the army marching against the Mormons, the Utah War, the government's great pointless expedition, and in October of that year, at Simpson's Hollow on the Green River Country Road, Mormon raiders under a man named Lot Smith rode down on the trains, polite as deacons, moved the bullwhackers off and burned them. 52 wagons in 2 trains, 300,000 pounds of the army's flour and bacon and coffee, one match at a time. Clute stood on a rise, he says, with his whip in his hand, a whip against cavalry, and watched 9 years of his life's outfit go up in a column of smoke you could see for 30 miles, standing black at the bottom. You know the shape. And here is the thing, he says, leaning forward, and the candle moves his shadow on the log wall. The government never made it good. The firm hauled on the army's promise, lost near $500,000 in burned freight and a ruined season, and Congress, when the bills came due, declined to pay, session after session, and declined still. Since that October, he says, holding up his scarred thumb and forefinger a hair apart, Russell, Majors and Waddell have been this close to the Falls. Everything since is rowing. The stage lines they bought, rowing. The mail they run to Denver, rowing. And this spring they strapped the fastest, prettiest boat ever built on this continent onto their backs. He nods at the door, at the trail beyond it, at you. And it loses money at both ends and the middle, and they knew it would, son. Don't ever think they didn't know. Majors told Russell to his face it could never pay. He built it anyway. It was never meant to pay. It was meant to be seen. Then he tells you what you already half know, the banker's arithmetic, but from underneath, from inside the wagons, which is different, that the firm's paper is quoted like a sick man's pulse in every counting room from Sacramento to St. Louis. That the hay contractor from the Carson Valley has been paid in 60-day promises 3 times running and has begun politely to require gold. That William Russell, the head on the creature that dreams, the one Majors calls not fondly Napoleon, is in Washington City this very summer, borrowing against borrowed money, pledging what is already pledged, chasing the one thing that can save the house, the great mail contract, the $600,000 subsidy next spring, when the Southern Roots friends can maybe be outvoted. Everything, Clute says, everything you rode through this spring, the burying you did, boy, the man you read scripture over, all of it is collateral on one bet in one city neither of us will ever see. You sit with that. The stove ticks. Ada's needle has stopped. Then why, you finally ask him, do you stay? He owed you the truth and gave it. He owes you this too, and he pays it slower. He looks at his hands, the knuckle-sprung roots of them, 9 years of ox country in them, and he says, because the thing itself is true, even if the money's a lie. He says it about the way you'd expect a freighting man to say it, embarrassed, half angry, looking at the wall. The letters are true. The boys are true. That mare in the corral is true. A man can serve a rotten house and an honest road at the same time, he says. Done it all my life. There is no other kind of house, only other kinds of road. And then, because the evening has gone too large for him, he closes it the way he closes everything, anyhow. You're on the westbound tomorrow. You're late to bed. You climb to the loft and Charlie is already up there pretending he wasn't listening, lying so still he creaks, and after a while in the dark his voice comes over, smaller than his daytime voice. Is it true, what the old man said? The company's busted. And you lie there looking at the shakes of the roof you cannot see, feeling the folded notice soft in your boot by the tick, hearing gold on wood, 60 days, 40 cents on the dollar, it was meant to be seen. And you say the only thing that is entirely true, the mail's running, ain't it? And Charlie says, yeah. And that is the whole conversation, and neither of you sleeps for a while, and the river says the one thing it says. Mr. Deems comes on the 11th of August, and this time the ceremony is different, and you want to notice everything, because this is how a great house dies, not with a crash, but with a change in the paper. The strong box opens, your $100 comes out as 60 in gold. The sound on the wood shorter now, 3 coins, not 5, and the rest in company scrip, drafts on the house, printed promises, payable at Leavenworth or St. Joseph in 60 days, crisp and handsome, with an engraving of a wagon train on them, which you will come to find very funny in a bitter month yet to come, an ox train engraved on the promises of the company that invented the fastest thing alive. Deem's gloved hands move the paper with perfect confidence. Temporary, he says. The rebuilding, he says. The contract next session, he says, and the word contract comes off his tongue rubbed smooth, a word he has said many 100 times this trip up the line to men whose faces he prefers not to remember. Clute takes the station share without expression, and files it in the ledger. Ada takes the households and puts it in the coffee tin on the shelf above the stove, where the button money lives. and the tin makes no sound at all when paper goes into it. And you notice that, the no sound, the way you once noticed a raven's calm. You keep your 3 gold pieces in the flour sack with the Bible and the thimble. The scrip you fold flat next to the notice in your boot, promises against promises, and you ride the eastbound out 2 mornings later over ground where the burned stations are already wearing new stone and the desert takes no position on any of it, and Sand Mountain, in a south wind, sings. On the last Sunday of August, with no mail due till Tuesday, you do a thing you've been meaning to do since April. You take Sage with Clute's leave and ride up into the hills south of the station, to the high saddleback ridge the sun comes over, just to see. Not to carry anything, not to be anywhere by any hour. It is the first time in 5 months you have sat a horse with nothing on your knees, and Sage keeps swivelling an ear back at you, suspicious of a boy with no schedule, and you keep laughing at her, and your laugh sounds rusty to you like a gate not much used this year. The climb takes the morning. Juniper and mahogany brush, then bare rotten granite, the mare picking her way, grasshoppers clattering up like sparks, and then the top and the wind, and you dismount and stand holding the bridle, and the world falls open in every direction at once, and you stop breathing for a moment because you had not understood, until this moment, what it is you have been living inside. The whole basin lies below you like a map of itself. The Carson comes down out of the blue western wall in its ribbon of green, and you can follow it, bend by bend. There is Willow Bend, your whole life, a brown fleck and a thread of stove smoke you could cover with your thumbnail. There is Bucklands. There, on its bluff, the raw new geometry of Fort Churchill, the parade ground a tan postage stamp, the flag a grain of colour. You can see the road, the actual ruts, a pale scratch running the length of the valley with its dust flags crawling. Freight there, stage there, loose stock there, you read them now without knowing you're doing it. You can see the burned country north, hazy, and the dry lakes shining their false water, and range behind range behind range going east, blue, bluer, gone. And through it all, thinner than any of it, thinner than anything, the trail. Your trail. East past the river bend, out along the flats, a line you cannot actually see at this distance and can perfectly see anyway, because your body holds every rod of it. And somewhere out there under the shimmer, small beyond all reason, is a mountain of sand 600 feet high, reduced by this altitude to a pale crumb, and you stand there in the wind 16 years old, and you do the thing this year has taught you to do. You put things side by side and let them argue. The letters, $5 the half ounce, and the paper promises at 40 cents, the 2 minutes and the 60 days, the boys who are true, and the books which are lies, both riding the same thread of trail you could cover with one finger from here. 1,966 miles of it, and you're one boy on 185-mile pendulum of it, and from this ridge even the fort is a stamp and even the war is a haze, and you understand at last, barely a cog in a machine that is itself barely a scratch on a floor of a country that was old before scratching was invented. But you're here. You're the cog that is standing on this ridge in this wind with this mare's warm breath on your neck. The scratch is your scratch. That is not nothing. That is you decide, watching your thumbnail-sized life smoke quietly below you. Actually the whole of what anyone gets. A scratch, a wind, a mare, a reason to be somewhere by Tuesday. You're about to mount when you see the other rider, and your stomach drops the year's full distance in half a second. A horseman, motionless, at the far end of the saddleback watching you. And then Sage, who saw him long before you did and said nothing, blows a soft greeting through her nose, and the horseman lifts one hand, palm out, and comes on at a walk, and it is Washoe John. He is thinner. There is something in his face that was not there in April, and something gone from it that was. He is riding a gaunt pony and leading nothing, and he tells you in the plain, unhurried way he tells everything, the outline of his summer, and you will keep the details all your life in the private place where you keep the man in the yard at Cold Springs, and I will give you only the shape of it. The family is alive. The lake country is closed to them. The bands are scattered north and east in a burned year with the pine nut groves cut and the fish weirs behind an army, and winter is coming, and the arithmetic of that is not complicated, and he does not make it complicated. He says it the way Clute reads a ledger. Then he asks, nodding down the valley, whether the red-haired woman still makes the apple pies, and whether the station could use a hand with the stock through the cold months. And something in your chest lets go so suddenly that you have to look away toward the fort and blink like a fool. He rides down with you. At the station, Clute meets him at the yard, and the two men look at each other for a moment, and Clute says, "Wages are part paper now. I'd sooner warn you." And Washoe John looks at the corral, at the horses who have missed him. They crowd the rail shameless, and says, "Pay the paper part in flour." And that is the entire negotiation. 2 sentences, and he is back on the roster by supper, and at supper Ada sets the first cut of pie in front of him without a word, and the stove ticks, and something in the station that has been out of true since May sits back down into its joints. September is Buckland's, one warm Saturday night, and you may as well see this too, because it is the last easy night of the year, and you will ration the memory of it clean through the winter. Buckland's Ranch is the nearest thing your stretch of river has to a town. Station, tavern, store, toll bridge, corrals, all run by Sam Buckland, and on Saturdays half the valley washes up there. Teamsters, ranch hands, off-duty soldiers down from the fort with their pay, prospectors going to or from the Washoe with their delusions. Inside is one long low room, tallow candles, a plank bar on barrels, the smell stacked to the rafters, whiskey, pipe smoke, tallow, horse, men. The whiskey is the Rhodes whiskey, the 2-bit tarantula juice of evil memory, and the soldiers drink it like a duty and pay for it like a tax. And here is your vice of the era, if you're collecting them. Not gin in a city cellar, but frontier whiskey at a plank bar, the solvent this whole country runs on, cutting teamsters loose from their wages, soldiers from their sense, and now and then some shaking ruin of a man from everything he ever had, so that he ends sleeping in Buckland's hay like the straw at the bottom of a gin shop sign, and nobody concerned, because this happens every Saturday, because this is normal. You drink nothing. This surprises exactly no one, which surprises you. "Pony," says the man next to you at the bar by way of complete explanation, to a soldier who offered you a glass, and the soldier nods and withdraws the offer with a kind of respect, and you understand something new. The oath has leaked out of the company and become a public possession. The whole territory has decided the pony boys don't drink. The way it has decided you are all fearless and all true, and it enforces the legend on you kindly, and there is no arguing with it. You're being ridden by a story. It pays better than most horses you've sat. Charlie plays cards, Monty with 2 teamsters and a corporal, and loses $4 with enormous style, and tells the Ohio lies, and midway through the evening a soldier who was at the June fight starts telling his version of it loudly at the bar, all powder smoke and glory, and you watch Charlie's face go slowly wooden across the table, and presently Charlie cashes out, such as there is to cash, and comes and stands by you and says, quietly, "Watch the door with me a spell," and you do. The two of you leaning on the frame, looking out at the dark corrals, saying nothing, while behind you the war is retold by a man it treated gently. Charlie rode the eastern stretches through the burning weeks. He's never said one word to you about what he saw, and he never will. And this leaning on a door frame is the whole of his testimony, and you stand shoulder to shoulder with it until the soldier's story is over. You ride home before midnight, the two of you, and the ride home is the part you'll keep. No moon. The stars doing their enormous silent argument overhead. The Milky Way a spill of milk indeed, so bright it prints faint shadow on the pale of the road. The horses walk. You let them. There is nothing tonight to be somewhere by. Coyotes yammer somewhere south. A sound that stood your hair on end in March and is a lullaby by September. The desert singing to itself about its own affairs, nothing to do with you. Charlie, half asleep in the saddle, hums 3 bars of something Ohio, loses it, finds it. The river comes into hearing on the right, the one thing it says. And along there somewhere, jogging in the dark with your body doing all the riding and your mind off its picket line, it comes to you, simply without drama, the way the big ones always come, that you are, at this exact walking moment, happy. That between the burying in May and whatever the paper promises are ripening into, in this held breath between one catastrophe and the next, with a wooden-faced friend humming beside you and a mean-eyed mare under you and pie, waiting in a coffee-smelling room you have a right to walk into, you have somehow contrived to be a boy with a home in the exact middle of the loneliest employment on the continent of North America. Orphans preferred. You think it this time almost with a smile. The company wanted boys with nothing to lose. It is September, and you take inventory in the starlight, and the finding of the audit is too late. You've gone and gotten things to lose. The audit is correct. Winter is coming to collect. Tom Ferris comes to Willow Bend in the first week of October, and Tom Ferris is 14 years old. He says 16. He says it the way you'd hold up a hand of cards you hadn't looked at yet. He's small even for 14, out of a wagon family that broke up at Ragtown. A death, a remarriage, a stepfather with arithmetic of his own about mouths, and Bolivar Roberts's men took him on because he weighs less than the mochila does near enough, and because the autumn has openings. You know what the openings are. Boys quit. Boys get hurt. One boy on the Eastern Division is dead. The line eats boys the way the horses eat hay, steadily, and the ads go back up on the walls, and here, blinking in the yard with a war bag half his own size is what the ads catch. The first night at supper he talks too much, the way the scared ones do. Big fast talk about riding, about Indians, about what he'll do with $100 a month. And Charlie needles him, because Charlie is 17, and it is the immemorial right of 17 to needle 14, and Ada feeds him until the talk slows, and Clute says nothing at all, only watches, the way he watched you in March. And when the boys' first night ride comes, a week on, you're in the yard at 2 a.m. to hold the horse, and you can feel him shaking through the animal, both of them shaking, boy into horse and horse back into boy, a closed circuit of pure fright standing in a lantern circle, and he looks down at you and says, in a voice with the big talk all gone out of it. What if I lose the trail? And you hear yourself say it. The horse knows the trail. Trust the horse. Ride light and be listening. You'll be surprised what you can feel. And then, because his face doesn't change, you add the other thing, the thing that is actually true. It's bad the first 3 times. It gets easier. I'd not lie to you. It gets easier. You, the veteran. You, the old man of 16. No, 17. Your birthday goes by that same week in November's first days, unremarked because you never told anyone the date, and you spend the evening of it listening for a horse that's late in a sleet wind, and when you realise what day it is, you laugh out loud, alone in the yard at the whole of it. And the horse comes in, and it's Tom on time, mud to the eyebrows, grinning like sunrise, and that is your birthday present, a 14-year-old delivered alive out of the sleet, and better than most you've had. Now, November of 1860, history has been going on, all this while out beyond the ranges, and twice a week all summer and fall it has run under your knees in locked pouches. The conventions, the split parties, the country working itself toward the cliff edge in tissue paper dispatches. Lincoln, Douglas, Breckinridge. Names you carry at first the way you carry any freight, by weight. But out here even the weather of it reaches you. California and the far west papers hang on every eastern mail. Men at Buckland's argue secession now over the 2-bit whiskey. The soldiers at the fort have gone quieter this fall, the officers especially, southern men some of them, doing private arithmetic. Everyone watches the road for the pony the way farm folk watch the sky. And here is a thing that's been happening while you rode, quiet as grass growing, and it is time you noticed it, because it is the future arriving in sections. The telegraph, Charlie's joke, Clute's 10 more years, has not waited for Congress. The California Company has been building over the mountains all year, pole by pole, Placerville, Genoa, Carson City, and this fall the wire reaches Fort Churchill itself, 25 miles from where you sleep. Think what that means, and think hard, because nobody at your station says it out loud. The lightning now comes to the Carson River. The pony's western run is no longer Sacramento. Every eastbound dispatch that matters is handed off at the fort now, to a brass key and a wire, and gone over the Sierra in a spark. Your division, your river, your desert, your everything, is still the gap. You are the gap. The Pony Express, in November of 1860, is no longer the fastest thing in America. It is the fastest thing in the part of America the wire hasn't eaten yet. The election is the 6th of November, and the run that follows is the proudest thing the line has done in its young life, and you are in it, and I want you to have this night entire. The result clears the Eastern Telegraph at Fort Kearny, and goes on to horseback, and the division has planned it like a battle. Extra horses, the best boys, fresh relays doubled through the bad stretches, everything stripped for speed, because every newspaper and legislature and bar room on the Pacific coast is standing on tiptoe, and the company, broke, borrowed, 40 cents on the dollar, has decided to show the world one more time what the central route can do. The word comes west like a grass fire. Riders hand it on, station to station, day and night, through Salt Lake, down the long desert ladder, Cold Springs, Sand Springs, and at 4 in the morning of a freezing night, in the second week of November, it comes up the river flat to Willow Bend in the person of Roy the Kentuckian, who is standing in his stirrups a half-mile out, yelling, Roy, yelling. One word, over and over, and the word is Lincoln, Lincoln, Lincoln. Your leg. 2 minutes. Call it 90 seconds. Ada holding the lantern high. Clute slap on the mochila like a starter's gun. Tom whooping from the corral rail like the 14-year-old he is. And you are gone west with the name of the next president of a country already starting to tear, carrying it the last cold miles of its horseback life, up the dark valley with the river smoking beside you, to the gate of Fort Churchill, where a sleepy operator with his collar turned up takes the dispatch into the lamplight and sits down at his key, and the name Lincoln turns into small lightning and goes over the mountains without you. 7 days and some hours, Fort Kearny to the coast, telegraph to telegraph with the pony as the living wire in the middle. The California papers will crow for a week. Men will read that name in Sacramento saloons 3 days before the mails of 1848 would have gotten it out of Missouri. It is the machine's finest hour, and you're in the machine, and standing in the fort yard in the small hours, blowing on your fingers while the key chatters behind the lamplit window. You feel the two feelings at once, fully, and you will feel them together for the rest of this story. Pride like a coal in the breastbone, and watching the operator's little brass sparrow outpace every horse on earth without raising its heart rate. The other thing, the cold arithmetic standing quietly at the back of every triumph this year. They cheered the relay, but they paid for the wire. Winter shuts on the country like a lid. You'd been warned about the desert winter and had privately discounted the warnings, deserts being, in a boy's cosmology, hot. Now you learn. The wind comes off the Sierra loaded with razors. The alkali flats freeze into iron corduroy that can lame a horse in a mile if you push. Your run stretches from 9 hours to 12 to 14. The schedule slackens officially from 10 days to 12 and unofficially to whatever God allows. The 2-minute changes go to 5 because buckles must be worked in mittens, and buckles in a January headwind at 2 in the morning are a moral experience. You wear everything you own at once. Ada sews you a face cloth with a slit, and you ride the flats looking out of it like a bandit monk, ice building in the slit where your breath freezes, and some nights the cold stops being a temperature and becomes a landlord, a presence-riding pillion with its arms around your chest, patient, interested, waiting to see your judgment fail. Once, in the 3rd week of January, in a ground blizzard past Sand Springs, snow not falling but flying sideways, the whole surface of the desert airborne and streaming, the trail erased entire, the world a white roar 4 feet deep with stars strangely clear above it. You give up the reckoning and stop fighting the mare, and Sage brings you the last 11 miles to Cold Springs on nothing, on memory, on whatever a Mustang carries where a schedule ought to be, walks you straight to the stone corral wall you could not see until your knee touched it, and stands blowing while you hammer the gate with a fist you cannot feel, and the Cold Springs men pull you inside their rebuilt walls and pour you coffee. You hold with both wrists, and one of them looks out the door at the mare and says, with religious sincerity, "That is a $40 horse." And everyone laughs the wheezing laugh of the barely rescued, and you sleep that day like the dead sleep, and wake to find someone has rubbed Sage down and blanketed her, and given her the grain ration of a horse twice her size, which is the only currency of gratitude a station has. That is also the month the paper comes due. All of it. Everywhere. At once. The news arrives, as ever, on your own line's back, in the newspapers the pony itself carries, and it goes through the stations of the division like ice water through teeth. William Russell, the head that dreams, Napoleon, The man in Washington City with the contract almost in his hands, has been arrested. 2 days before Christmas, in New York, on a charge you have to read 4 times, and Clute reads aloud at the table slower and slower, as if the words were fighting him. Bonds. Millions in bonds belonging to the Indian Trust Fund of the United States. Money held by the government in trust of all the money on this sad earth for tribes it has dispossessed. Pledged secretly to Russell by a clerk of the Interior Department and taken by Russell knowingly, season after desperate season, as collateral to float the drowning house, to pay for stations, for stock, for rebuilding after the burnings, for wages, for you. There it is, boy, the last floor of it, the wages in the strongbox, the gold that rang on Ada's table in the good months, the 60% that still does. You know now, everyone on the line knows now what river it was drawn from. You think of the man in the yard at Cold Springs, buried in ground his people took from other people, at wages floated on money embezzled from the trust accounts of dispossession, and you are 17 years old, and you fold that thought flat and put it in the boot with the others, because it does not fit anywhere else you own, and it never will fit anywhere else you own. Some cargo is like that. You carry it because you are the one it was handed to. Congress convenes its investigation. Russell resigns from the express company's presidency in the spring. The bond clerk is ruined. The great contract, the $600,000 salvation, the whole ruinous advertisement was galloped into existence to win. When the overland mail is finally moved north to the central route in the March legislation, as it actually at last is, the fat of it goes not to the broken house of Russell, Majors and Waddell, but to the Butterfield interests moved up from the south, with the Pony Run kept alive underneath as a condition, a subcontract, a tolerated remnant. The firm that built the fastest thing in America ends the winter as a hired hand on its own road. Deems comes in February with no strong box at all. He comes, to say it plainly, because not coming would say more, and he sits at Ada's table with his gloves in his lap, and his smoothness worn through at the elbows like anybody's coat, and he does not say contract even once, which is how you know. Wages will come, he says, are coming, are owed. And there he stops because Clute has looked up, and something passes between the two men, the agent and the old bullwhacker, 20 years of this company's weather in one look, and Deems closes his mouth on the next promise unsaid, which is the only wholly honest thing you ever see him do. After the buggy goes, Clute stands a long time at the shelf where the coffee tin lives. Then he takes down the tin and takes out the folded scrip. The handsome printed promises with the engraved ox train, 5 months of them now, and he counts it slowly at the table into a squared stack and squares it once more with his root-knuckled hands and puts it back and puts the lid on and sets the tin on the shelf and says, "To the stove," in the voice of a man closing a ledger for the year. Well, we are all of us advertisements now. And then he banks the fire and bars the door and the winter goes on, and this is the part I most want you to hear, the mail goes on. That is the fact that will not resolve. They chord this whole story as written in. The house was rotten. The money was stolen. The promises were paper. And twice a week, every week, all winter, boys got up at 2 a.m. into weather with razors in it and carried other people's words across the gap in the world on time, because the thing itself was true, even though everything under it was false. And if you can hold both halves of that in your hands at once gently, without crushing either one, then you have understood the Pony Express and half of everything else your species has ever built. Spring comes back the way it came the first time, with mud and lamb's tails on the willows and the river rising. Only now you are a year older in a place where years are counted double, and the spring itself is historic and knows it. On the 2nd of March, with the stroke of a pen 2,000 miles away, the country you live in changes its name. The western slice of Utah Territory becomes the territory of Nevada, and Carson City swells with certainty about its capital destiny, and men at Bucklands toast the new name in the old whiskey, and the river and the desert and the mayor, none of whom were consulted, continue exactly as before under new management, as is their ancient practice. 2 days later, in Washington, the tall name you carried west in November puts his hand on a book bound not so differently from the one in your flour sack, and becomes president of a country that is, that very week, no longer whole. 7 states gone already, a rival government seated in Montgomery, forts besieged in southern harbours, and the address he gives that day, the words on which peace or war may actually hinge, must reach California, whose loyalty is courted by both sides, faster than rumour and distortion can reach it, and so the line does, one last time, supremely, the thing it was born for. Everything stripped for speed again, the schedule thrown away again, and the inaugural address of Abraham Lincoln crosses the gap. Telegraph's end to telegraph's beginning. In 7 days and 17 hours, the fastest the mail has ever moved across this continent by muscle and heart, the fastest it ever will. You ride your leg of it in a March wind, and the packet under your knees is heavier than paper has any right to be, and you know while it is happening, this is the strange grace of that spring. You know, at 17, leaning down the dark valley with history on your knees, that you're at the top of your life's one mountain, and you are correct, and you do not waste it. You feel every mile of that ride. You feel it now, an old man somewhere, whoever you became. Some rides don't end, that is the spring's crest. The rest of the spring is the long grade down the far side, and it goes quietly, the way the big things mostly go. The overland mail's new coaches begin rolling the central route as the season turns, and the pony settles into its subcontracted place beneath them, still running twice a week, faithful as tide, but the postage has started falling, $5 down toward $1, the way prices fall when a thing's days are visibly numbered, and everyone on the road now says when, not if. Because the bill has passed. The one Clute promised was 10 years off. Congress, in the last June before its house caught fire entire, voted the money for a transcontinental telegraph, and the companies are formed, and the contracts are let, and the crews are hiring. One outfit building west from the Missouri, one building east from Carson City, racing each other toward a splice somewhere in the Utah middle, at Salt Lake. By autumn, they say, and nobody laughs at them now. Charlie Beckett leaves in May. He tells you first, before he tells Clute, which is how you learn what you are to him. The telegraph outfit is hiring teamsters and pole men at good wages, gold wages, actual gold, and Charlie's 18 now with a girl in Ohio who has consented by tissue paper letter to consider the matter, and a man who is considering being considered wants wages that ring on wood. He says all this fast, in the loft, in the dark, not looking at you, and then he says the true part quietly. The pony's done, see? You know it, and I know it. I'd sooner help build the thing that kills it than sit here and watch it die. At least this way it's my hands, and you lie there, and the river says the one thing it says, and you find you cannot be angry, though you try for a while, because it would be simpler. He is right, and it is so exactly like this whole year of your life, that the fastest boy you know will spend the summer planting, 1 pole at a time, 60 poles to the mile, the stake through the heart of the fastest thing there ever was, for gold wages with his own hands so he can afford to marry. That all you finally say is, "Write to her on the pony then, while it's cheap." And Charlie laughs in the dark. One short exhalation, Clute's own laugh, caught off him like an accent. And that is how you and Charlie say the thing you're both saying. He goes in the 3rd week of May. Handshake in the yard, his war bag on the stage rack, Ada's dried apples in the top of it. You do not see him again for 11 years, and when you do, in a Virginia City street, prosperous, mustached, married, he will bellow across 4 lanes of traffic the words, 2 minutes, boy, and the 2 of you will laugh until men stare, and neither of you will be entirely laughing. Tom moves up into Charlie's runs. There is a new boy in Tom's old place within the month, greener than Tom ever was, and you hear Tom in the yard at 2 a.m. telling him the horse knows the trail. It gets easier. I'd not lie to you, in Tom's own words, but your exact cadences. And you stand in the door listening with the strangest feeling in your chest, like hearing your own hoofbeats through a floor. This is how everything true gets passed, you think. Hand to hand, mouth to mouth, 2 minutes at a time. The locked pouches carry the words of the great, the way pocket carries everything else. And then it is June, high June of 1861, and the poles come up your valley. You meet the crews on your westbound runs now, wagons of peeled poles snaking east from Carson City, pits going down every 80-odd feet, the fresh timber standing bare and astonished in the sage, with its shadow lying long across your trail. The wire itself follows in coils, and the summer wind gets into the strung sections and plays on them, a thin ringing hum you can hear from horseback, a sound this desert has never made before, and Sage's ears lock onto it every single time, and every single time you say to her, riding under the singing wire with the mail on your knees, "Easy, it's just the future, it don't bite riders, it just replaces them. You're 17. You will be paid, in the end, most of what you're owed, in a mingle of gold and paper and promises kept late. And you will do, in the after years, the thing such boys did, drive stage a while, tend other men's cattle, carry a star briefly in a town best forgotten, marry, at 26, a Carson Valley girl who makes pie nearly the equal of Ada Clute's, and never once tell her wisely of the comparison. And one autumn day, far downstream of everything, sorting a trunk, you will come upon a small calf-bound book, and a brass thimble, and a square of folded paper worn soft as flannel, and you will open it on your knee by the window and read, in the old thunderous type, young, skinny, wiry fellows, willing to risk death daily, orphans preferred, and there at the window, with your hair gone grey and the century grown old around you, you will finally hold the whole of it in your 2 hands at once. That they asked for boys with nothing, so the dyeing would cost the ledger nothing, and the books were rotten, and the wages were stolen, and the glory was an advertisement for a contract that never came. All true, every dirty word of it true, the whole secret exactly as dirty as the banker priced it. And that a boy with nothing, given a thing to hold and a reason to be somewhere by Tuesday, made out of that swindle the 1 year of his life when he was entirely, magnificently necessary. And that this is also true, and that neither truth will yield to the other, then, now, or ever. You will fold the paper back along its soft old creases and put it away with the Bible and the thimble and go into supper. And that is the last we will see of you old. Come back now. Come back to 17. The story has one evening left. It is late June, 1861. The eastbound went through at sundown, Tom's leg tonight. You heard the 2 minutes from the corral, crisp as ever, the slap on the leather gone. The supper dishes are dried and racked. Clute is at the ledger, moving his lips over figures that will never come right and no longer frighten anyone. Ada's needle ticks against her thimble, a small bright metronome. Washer John has gone up to the corral for his last look at the stock, the horses murmuring at him in the dusk the way they never murmur at anyone else. And you take your tin cup out to the bench by the door, the same cottonwood bench where this story found you 15 months ago with the floor trembling, and you sit in the long blue evening with the day's heat breathing back out of the station wall behind you, and you watch the light go off the ranges east, range behind range, blue, bluer, gone. Down the valley, very faint, the new wire hums its one thin note. You do not yet know the date, but I do, so let me hold the lamp for you a moment, here at the edge of it. On the 24th of October, 4 months from this bench, the two ends of the wire will meet at Salt Lake City, and a Chief Justice in San Francisco will send the first message through to Washington, and the continent will close like a book. 2 days after that, without ceremony, the Pony Express will be discontinued. 18 months start to finish. 600-odd runs, 30-some thousand letters, one mochila lost in all that desert and all that war, a handful of boys and station men who never aim home, and a company already sliding into the bankruptcy it was riding away from the whole time. The freighting empire of Russell, Majors and Waddell will be broken up for debts within the year. The three-headed creature dies of arithmetic. The thing it built by accident as the legend, the boy on the flying horse, turns out to be the only asset on the whole ruined ledger that never stops earning. But that is October's business, and this is June, and none of it is yours to carry tonight. Tonight the line is running. Tonight the horses are fed, $60 hay and no apologies, and the mochila is east of Sand Mountain by now, riding some other boy's knees under the same first stars, and your run comes Thursday, and that is as far ahead as a rider needs the trail to be lit. Set the cup down. Lean your head back against the logs. They are warm as a stove side, and they tick faintly, giving up the day. Listen to it, one at a time, the whole of what you have. The river saying the one thing it says which you understand at last was never words. It is just the sound the world makes when it keeps going. The horses at the corral shifting, blowing, Sage's iron shoe ringing once on a stone like a small bell rung by accident, the wire's far hum, thin as a mosquito, carrying somebody's urgent words over the mountains without troubling a single horse, and you find tonight you can forgive it. It is only doing what you did, faster. Everything is the wire before some other wire. Ada's needle. Clute turning a page. A coyote away south, opening the desert's own mail. Your body is heavy on the bench in the good way now, the way a day of honest weight leaves it. Your hands are a rider's hands at rest, cracked, capable, empty, done. Nobody in this world needs you before Thursday. Hold that sentence up and look at it, you, of all boys. Nobody needs you tonight, and yet you are wanted here, in this station, at this bench, by these people. The woman whose biscuits rode every mile you ever rode. The old man who called you late so he'd never have to call you anything fonder. The man whose name you were never given, who taught you to read the world's smoke. The boy out east on the dark trail right now, carrying it all forward in your cadences. Wanted, preferred, and not for being an orphan, for being Silas. That is the station you actually ride for. It was never on the company's list. You're warm enough. You're fed enough. You're safe enough. Say them slowly, the way the desert taught you to say everything worth saying. Warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have a bench and a blanket within reach, and a mare in the corral who would find you the gate in a white roar of nothing. That is more than the men in the silk waistcoats had, the ones who owned the ledgers and lost everything. That is enough. It was always going to be enough. The dark comes up the valley the way it does, from the ground first, the sage going from grey-green to grey to a soft nothing. The ranges holding their blue rim of last light like a bowl holds a ring, and then letting it go. The stars arrive in their savage thousands and are tonight not savage at all. They are only far and patient, and they have watched every rider there ever was, on every road there ever was, and they will watch the wire too, and whatever comes after the wire, and they're not sorry about any of it, and neither, tonight, finally, are you. Let the ledger close now. Let the 60 days run out unpresented. Let the polls march and the paper fall and the great houses rise and fail. That was never the cargo. The cargo was always this: words carried through the dark from people who love to people who wait. Centuries will pass. The trail you rode will lie under a paved highway that travellers 100 years on will call the loneliest road in America, and they will drive your whole 85 miles in an hour and 20 minutes with music playing and never feel the river hit their thighs. The stations will melt back into stone heaps and historical markers. The mochila will lie in a glass case in a museum, and school children will file past it, and not one of them will be told to imagine the smell of wet leather at 4 in the morning. So you will have to trust me to have told them. But people will still send their words across the dark to each other, still pay too much to say too little, too late, to someone too far away. Still lie awake, as you're not quite doing, waiting for hoofbeats, for the mail, for the small, definite sound of an answer arriving. Some things don't change. The gap in the world doesn't change. There is always a gap in the world, and there is always, thank God, some skinny fool willing to ride it. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way the desert takes a day's heat, slowly, evenly, holding you a long warm while before letting go. Let the river run through the dark without you. It knows the way. Let the horses stand easy at the rail, one hip slack, ears at half-mast, dreaming whatever horses dream, which is probably running, which is probably you. Let the wire hum to itself. Let the letters sleep in their locked leather under the stars east of Sand Mountain. Let the whole strung-out, swindled, magnificent line of it rest tonight in the hands of other boys, wanted boys, boys exactly like you were asked for. You were asked for. You came. You carried it. It is out of your hands tonight, and your hands have earned their emptiness. Let your breathing find the mare's road home, the one that needs no eyes. Let your thoughts slow to a walk now, and then to a stand, and then let the reins go altogether. You're warm enough. You're fed enough. You're safe enough. The mail goes through, and tonight, at last, it goes through without you. Tomorrow will come soon enough. Hoof beats up out of the dark, 2 minutes, boy. All of it, again. But that's tomorrow. For now there's just this, the bench, the log's warmth going, the needle's small bright tick, the river. Rest now, rider. Good night.